Welcome to another RideShare Drivers Club tutorial, and today we're going to talk about incentives. So Tony, tell me what incentives are, and are they good for anything? Are they just kind of snake oil from Uber? How do you best use incentives? That kind of stuff. Take it away, Tony.
Incentives have their place, especially for new drivers, because it gives a new driver a feeling of confidence that they're going to be making some money. And it's a way for the TNCs, Uber and Lyft, to make their drivers dependent on that kind of money. So when they first start out, I can make $35 an hour. And they can if they follow the incentives. And they get a couple of good paychecks, and then the incentives go away. And the driver's saying, well, I got to just work a little harder. So incentives for experienced pro drivers that have been around for a while, they've already realized that Uber and Lyft offer the incentives at the times where you're going to meet that incentive quota anyway. Friday nights, Saturday nights, drive between 10 and 3, and you'll make $28 an hour. Well, a moron could make $35 an hour between 10 and 3 on a Saturday night. It's just the way it is. You know, there's surges going on, and there's a lot of action. So here's the thing about incentives. The one good incentive that Lyft has that Uber does not is that the hours worked per week. If you want to stay with the incentive to work 50 hours, Lyft will not take anything. They won't take a cut. Every dime that you make in fares is yours to keep, but you got to work 50 hours, and you have to work prime time hours too. If you only work 30 hours, they'll keep 10% instead of 20. So those incentives are good. The trick is you have to stick with that TNC. You can't be switching back and forth from Uber to Lyft, trying to chase incentives or chase the alcohol on a Friday or Saturday night. You got to stick with the one Lyft. As far as Uber's incentives go, I don't even pay attention to them anymore. I used to, because they already have a profile on you. If you've been around, you got 1,000 rides in, 1,500 rides. They know what you can do, so they don't need to offer you anything. The only way they'll offer you something is you take a couple of weeks off, and then they'll think, oh, I lost a good driver, so I'll hit them with an email. I'm giving you an incentive for Friday night, $30 an hour. Okay, I got the idea, but you'll still make that anyway. Most seasoned pro drivers will blow past the incentives that they offer. The incentives are usually for the newer drivers and drivers who have laid off for a while. They haven't actually quit, but maybe they're working part-time. And Uber sees that they're not working on a Friday and Saturday night, and that's when they need drivers on the street to keep their surges lower. Understand? So the more drivers they can put on the street, offering them incentives that they may or may not be able to reach, is a tactic that the TNCs use. I don't pay attention to the incentives any longer. I recommend that most new drivers, if you're a new driver, either Lyft or Uber, pick your TNC that you're going to be faithful to. Stop switching back and forth, because there's no percentage in it, even though some of the blogs will say switch back and forth to get more rides. If you're worried about incentives, ride the horse you came in on and ride them all the way home.
Okay, now let me ask you this, because I was reading a blog post the other day, and this driver had listed out, 20 things they wish they had, known before they got into it. And they talked about incentives. And they seemed quite bitter to me about incentives. And they said things like, always remember that incentives are for their benefit and not yours. And also they said things like that, if you're actually getting a lot of incentives, you're probably doing something wrong. And I mean, can you explain that mindset to me better? And how do you feel about that?
The TNCs aren't giving anything away to the drivers at all, right? Whatever they put out is for their benefit. For instance, football games, baseball games, concerts. Go to the concert where it's going to be a million people coming out of the concert, and you're going to get we're going to give you an incentive of $30 an hour. Well, you can only do one ride at the concert because of the traffic. So what, you're going to go for that incentive? So the incentives they offer are for their benefit. They get to get more people away from the venue, whatever it is, or to the venue. But it's not doing the driver any good. And when they say, we have a concert tonight, the ball game's in town, it's ending at 9:30, be at the stadium, I go in the opposite direction because you can only get one ride out of there, right? Because you can't get back in because of the traffic. And it's hard to find, people coming out of the stadiums, it's hard to find your passenger anyway, unless you give them step-by-step directions. So, yeah, the incentives, Lyft has a great incentive if you want to work 50 hours a week.
Well, that's a lot, though. Whew.
Well, a full-time driver should be able to do 50 hours a week.
Yeah, I could have done that at one point. I'm too old to do that now. I'd be tired.
The whole idea about RideShare Drivers Club, though, is to work less and make more.
That's true.
So we want to work as few hours as we can and make the most of the hours that we're driving and make more money.
Okay.
And there's some tricks in there, and we're going to teach them every trick in the book. One of the tricks is don't chase the incentives.
Don't chase the incentives.
Unless you're a Lyft driver and you're exclusively a Lyft driver, and then you got to put 50 hours in to make it pay, because you're not going to get as many rides with Lyft. You get the availability for the passenger to tip you, which helps a lot. But 50 hours with Lyft, you're not going to do many rides, so you get to keep 100% of a lot less.
Okay, well that makes sense. Now too, and maybe other people know this, but when you say that the incentive is, you'll make $30 an hour, are they promising you an hourly wage, and even if you don't drive anybody, you're going to make $30 an hour? Or are they just saying there's so much business, you're going to get $30 an hour?
No, they build in conditions to every incentive.
Okay.
In other words, a $30 an hour guarantee is if you have 50 minutes of the 60 minutes in an hour with the app on, that you keep your acceptance rate above 90%, and that you do at least one, sometimes they say 2 rides an hour. Well, what if you do one ride in 58 minutes, and the next ride comes in at 61 minutes? It's within an hour, but it's not within their hour. It has to be within the clock hour. So you miss that incentive. You only get paid for one trip at a normal rate. So it's a timing thing too. Don't look to take incentives where you need two rides in an hour halfway through the hour, because you'll never do it.
That's interesting. Do you
got to
think
be on the clock?
Go ahead.
At least 50 minutes of that hour in order to achieve the incentive.
Do you think they give better incentives to new drivers, and then after you've driven for a while, they figure, well, this guy's going to keep on doing it, so we're not going to give him as good of incentives? Have you noticed that?
It's hard to tell now, because when I first started driving, there was incentives all over the place, and I tried to take advantage of them. I don't give very many incentives anymore, except the ones to be at the ball game, which I disregard completely. Newer drivers will get incentives because Uber and Lyft want to get the driver hooked on that weekly income. Once you're hooked on that weekly income, especially that's for another video, where you're making so much money that you figure this is easy, you're going to go out and buy a new car, that's when they really got you. Because now you got a car payment to make, and they don't even have to offer you an incentive. You're going to be out there breaking your hump just to, 50 hours a week, just because you have to.
Yeah.
So they don't need to give you an incentive.
Okay, and so basically you would say that the bitterness I detected in that other driver on that blog
post... It's legitimate.
Okay. That's what I thought.
I don't like to come across bitter about anything, but,
Well, I know, me too. I think bitter is really dangerous. But still, sometimes when you're getting
TNCs are there for their own benefit. They're not out for the drivers, even though they should be, because the drivers are the lifeblood of the company. Without the drivers, they can't get their passengers moved around. But, that's another video we'll have about
That's absolutely another video. And it's on my list.
I'll bet.
It's on my list.
And I'd love to talk about that one.
Okay, well, maybe we'll do that next. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up for incentives, unless there's something else you want to say.
No,
that it?
incentives, new drivers, go to Lyft, do your 50 hours, make a lot of money. And if you can be a full-time driver with Lyft, there's nothing wrong with it. You get to keep all the money, and you get tips, and you'll do less driving, less wear and tear on your car. It's the incentives are good in that respect. But after you got a bunch of time in, and they got you hooked on the money, you won't be getting so many incentives all the time.
Okay, well, that makes sense. All right, well, that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.
All right, honey. Take care.
Okay.